When I was a kid, I had a small collection of singles. There were no Elvis records in there. They were just singles that were in the charts around about that time. So it would have been about 1978, I guess. And one day my cousin came around, and he's about 10 years older than me, and he's a huge Beatles fan. And I showed him my singles. I said, what do you think of these? And he looked at the first record and he said, B-sides better. And he looked at the second record and he said, B-sides better. And he looked at the next one, B-sides better. And it just carried on like that. He was looking through all my singles, and in every single case he said the B-side was better. And at the time I thought, wow, my cousin's really cool. He really knows music. Not only does he know the A-sides, he also knows the B-sides. And it was only many years later, when I was thinking about this episode, that I realized that he didn't know the B-sides at all, and he was just sparing my feelings. He didn't like the A-sides, so he said the B-side is better, meaning the B-side must be better than the A-side. Now, in the case of Elvis's singles, the B-sides really often were as good as, if not better than, the A-side. And in many cases, both sides of an Elvis single was exceptional. And that's what I want to talk about today. What I call 20 out of 20 singles. An Elvis single which had a 10 out of 10 song on one side and a 10 out of 10 song on the other side. And I'm going to go through the ones that I think are 20 out of 20 singles. And I'll go in reverse chronological order and just talk a little bit about each as we go through. So the first one I'll show you, the first 20 out of 20 single for me is Suspicious Minds and You'll Think of Me. And this particular copy is an original from the UK, late 1969, early 1970. This was in the charts, and there's the back side. When I first bought the single, the copy that I had at the time, it was an American reissue with a 1950s picture on the front. And I'd already known Suspicious Minds for many years through the Elvis's 40 Greatest albums. And I bought the single specifically for You'll Think of Me because the Back in Memphis album wasn't readily available in the UK at that time. This is late 1970s, early 80s. And yeah, I loved You'll Think of Me straight away. And Suspicious Minds, it took a while, but that grew on me over the years. And so yeah, this is a definite 20 out of 20 for me. The next one's quite interesting because it was never released in Japan. This is a UK copy of Guitar Man and High Heel Sneakers. And again, with Guitar Man, just like Suspicious Minds, it's a song I've known pretty much all my life, mainly through the Elvis's 40 Greatest LP, which I heard many times growing up. In the case of High Heel Sneakers, I heard that one. I think I became aware of that through the album called Elvis in Demand, a UK compilation album. And I also used to have an Australian EP called Such a Night, which had High Heel Sneakers on it as well. So I've known both songs for a long time. And Guitar Man is another song that took a long time to grow on me. I remember a friend of mine had the 40 Greatest album back in the 1970s, and he loved all the cool songs like Big Uncle Love and Guitar Man and Surrender, songs that I wasn't really into at the time, but many years later I realized he was right, and they're all great songs. Still with the 1960s for the next one, and that is this one here, Viva Las Vegas and What Did I Say? This is a Japanese copy. I'll just briefly open it out for you. And this record sold really well in Japan. And it's a sort of a six-sided or trifold insert with a lot of information on the inside about the movie, the cast, the songs, and so on. If you do decide to get this record, it's very, very easy to find, so you don't need to spend a lot of money on this. It's one of the easier Japanese records to find. And there's the old Black Victor label. In the case of this record, I was more familiar with What Did I Say initially through the Gold Records Volume 4 album. I used to listen to that every day when I was preparing for exams when I was 15 years old, just coming up to 16 years old. So that was a great song for me at the time. And I loved the guitar playing in that song and also the wild backing vocals. The introduction always got me as well with that keyboard introduction. And Yeah, it's difficult to choose between Elvis's vocals or Ray Charles's vocals, but they're both pretty much 10 out of 10 for me, both versions. In the case of Viva Las Vegas, again, I think that was the Elvis in Demand album where I heard that song first, and it didn't really do much for me either at first. It's another song that's grown on me over the years, but I just love the energy in it now. And going still with the 60s for the next single, and yet another song which I knew through the Elvis's 40 Greatest album. This single is She's Not You, backed with Just Tell Her Jim Said Hello. And that's a really underrated B-side in my opinion. One of the best Lieber Stoller songs Elvis ever recorded. Just Tell Her Jim Said Hello. And of course the A-side is also Lieber and Stoller with, is it Pommes or Schumann? It's Pommes, Stoller and Lieber. So this is a UK original. And I have a question for anybody out there who owns a copy of this from the UK original. I have 2 copies of this. Somehow I've ended up with 2 copies. And both copies appear mint. But when I play them, the sound is a little bit rough. There's a little bit of distortion on both copies. So I don't know if the whole batch was badly manufactured or whether just by bad luck I've got 2 copies that don't sound so good. So if you have a copy of this record, let me know if it sounds any good or not. The next record is a really special record for me because it was actually the first Elvis record that I ever bought in my life. And that is this one here, His Latest Flame and Little Sister. This is a Canadian single from 1977. This is not the exact copy that I bought, but it's exactly the same pressing. I just bought it for sentimental reasons. And this was part of a series they called Victor Collector Series. And it's on this black label here. To be honest, the records don't sound that great. They're not the best sounding copies of these singles, but like I said, it's really for sentimental reasons. And the covers are quite thick, a very thick card, more like an LP cover. And this was one of a series that was also released in the UK, and those reissues were Elvis's #1 single. So I'm guessing that the Canadians just copied the series from the UK idea. And the reason why I bought a Canadian copy back then as opposed to a UK copy was because the import was cheaper than the UK copy, if you can believe it. There was a shop in the middle of the city where I lived, in a marketplace, and they sold all kinds of imported records, Canadian copies, Greek copies or whatever. And they were all cheaper than the locally pressed records that you could buy in the HMV shop. So I bought a lot of records there over the years. And the song Little Sister also means a lot to me because when I was 11 years old, I sat next to a boy in class and we became friends because on the one hand, I was impressed that he knew the words to Little Sister, and he was also impressed because I knew the words to Cool for Cats by Squeeze, and that was the beginning of a lifelong friendship, and we're still friends today all these years later. And still with the 1960s for the next one, It's Now or Never and A Mess of Blues. So this is the American coupling. In the UK, we had Make Me Know It on the B-side because A Mess of Blues was released with The Girl of My Best Friend as the A-side, while we were waiting to get It's Now or Never because of copyright problems. And this is a French copy from the early 1970s. So, what a great single this is. I mean, what a contrast in styles. It's Now or Never and A Mess of Blues. You know, who else could pull off a single like that? And both sides being absolutely perfect. It's Now or Never, kind of semi-operatic style, and then the bluesy song on the B-side, A Mess of Blues. And I just love the piano playing, especially on both songs. Of course, the vocals are great, it goes without saying. So 350 singles to finish, and the next one is my favorite of the RCA era in the 1950s. And that is, I'll show you a Japanese copy here. This is One Night and I Got Stung. And as you can see, it has a completely different picture to the one used on the American picture sleeve. The copy that I have here, if you look in the bottom right corner there, you can see the price has been adjusted to 370 yen from 330 yen. So that means that this particular copy was sold in 1965, several years after it was released. Victor label, of course. Same coupling as America One Night and I Got Stung. And because it's 65, of course, it came with this red, white, and blue sleeve. So I just absolutely love the song One Night. I don't know what it was about it that Elvis was not happy with. I read somewhere that he was not particularly pleased with his version of it and didn't want to release it. But it's absolutely perfect as far as I'm concerned. And I love his guitar playing. It's a shame he didn't play lead guitar more on his records as far as I'm concerned. And I Got Stung. So I was listening to the FTD 2CD version of 50 Million Elvis Fans Can't Be Wrong recently. And if you're familiar with that CD, you'll know that on disc 2, there are about 20 odd takes of I Got Stung, one after the other. And I was listening to it. And after about 13 or 14 takes, my wife came into the room and said, "Is everything all right?" So I think she thought I was listening to the same song over and over again for some reason. Which of course I was, but they were all different takes. And I think this song, it needed that many takes. If you listen to the first takes and compare them with the last ones, they really did make a lot of good improvements on it. It certainly needed working on, but they actually nailed it in the end. Perfect performance there by everybody. So the last two are both from the Sun Records era. And the first one is the fourth single, Baby Let's Play House, and I'm Left, You're Right, She's Gone. This is another French copy from the early 70s. And I'm Left, You're Right, She's Gone has recently been elevated to a 10 out of 10 for me from a 9 out of 10 because of the two albums, the recent albums, Elvis at Sun and A Boy from Tupelo, on both of which the song sounds absolutely superb. And I've always loved the song, but just I never realized how good it was until I heard it without all the echo. And Baby Let's Play House, I've always loved that song. Maybe even Scotty Moore's finest hour as a guitar player on Elvis's records, especially that second solo, absolutely blistering stuff. And the last one, it's got to be the first one, Elvis's first ever single. Sadly, I don't have a Sun original to show you, but this is a American reissue on red vinyl. And what a great picture sleeve that is. Of course, there was no picture sleeve with the original. But it's a great photograph. He kind of looks awkward, but at the same time, he looks like a young man who knows what he wants. He has an idea of how he wants to dress, how he wants to look. The hair looks great. The bow tie looks a little bit weird, and the jacket's way too big for him. But you definitely get the sense that he has some idea of how he wants to dress. And I'll just show you the record here on red vinyl. This is part of a set that I got. It's in a wooden box. And they all sound pretty good, actually. So he started with the perfect single, as far as I'm concerned. Did he end with a perfect single in 1977, Way Down, Pleasure My Love? Not quite, but I think Way Down, Pleasure My Love is probably about an 18 out of 20 at least. And if you're wondering what my least favorite Elvis single of all time is, well, there's only one single that I can think of where I'm not really that keen on either the A-side or the B-side. And it's a single that wasn't actually released in the UK, actually. Any ideas? It's Life and Only Believe. Not, in my opinion, the most inspired Elvis single. But anyway, that's just what I think. Tell me what you think. Are there any 20 out of 20 singles that I missed? And let me know what your least favorite single is, if you like. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Cheers.